Hello and welcome to Newslaundry Interviews. Today we have with us probably one of the most well-known journalists in the country, whose name is Josy Joseph, who I have interviewed for the third time now because he has written yet another book. It's called Birth of a Nation. And I had started my book when he had come first with his book, and his third book has come out and my book is still under construction. So Josy, you're clearly very prolific. Before we get to your book, you've written 3 books since Newslaundry not began. We've probably done a lot more. You've done some of the biggest investigations in the country. Your book, Feast of Vultures, you got a 1,000 crore defamation suit also by Mr. Naresh Goyal, which you fought. And in the meantime, you were heading investigations first for The Hindu, then for Times of India. So how long are days in Kerala?
Unfortunately, I'm in Delhi.
Unfortunately,
Unfortunately, I live across the park. But
seriously, that's a lot of work you do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Maybe I write mediocre books, so it doesn't take much time. That's one possibility.
Humble, clearly.
But I think that I'm relatively disciplined. So I get up every day at 6 o'clock, 7 days a week. And I also have a quick switch on, switch off mode. So if I'm focusing on something, I do go deep in and I can switch off and move into the next one. And third is that, it's 99% perspiration. I've been at it for years now, so it has become a habit. So in the morning, if I don't have something very serious to read and think and challenge myself, I feel very uncomfortable. So in the first 2 hours of my waking day, my family also doesn't disturb me. They know that I'm doing something. And I feel very insecure in the morning. I wake up with a lot of insecurity. So I have to challenge myself.
And clearly you put your chops as an investigative journalist to a very different kind of use, where you visited the primary sources of information of when the British were set to leave India, in fact, a few decades before that even. I may get some names wrong. I have read most of this book. In fact, the gentleman who was like very cozy with all these princes and princesses. Basically, this book is about all these little kingdoms, big and small kingdoms that were dreaming of independence, that we'll get our kingdoms back once the British go, who did not really want to be a part of the Indian Union. Some of their heirs are sitting in parliament today. And the story is limited to how that part played out. So you used your chops as an investigative journalist to get into the details of that. You investigated that aspect, a historical aspect, of which almost 90% of the communication, there was a department that used to document all these little scandals and all the filth of these royal households. 90% of that was destroyed. You also got evidence of that, right? Just tell us a little bit about that. And okay, first tell us, Ram Guha has written a book on, when India came about. There's so many books written on this. So when you take up that same subject, did you feel that, dude, will I end up doing what has been done before already? How are you confident that you're going to explore a side of Birth of India, which has not been explored in such depth before?
See, Ram Guha is somebody that I really look up to, and he has written really classics that define modern Indian or modern non-fiction writing. So please don't compare me to Mr. Guha. Is too big a legend to be compared. But what I must tell you is that I did not start to write a book. In 2011-12 period, I was in Times of India, and I had a lot of time to kill. India Against Corruption movement had started, and there was concerns about economy being completely shaken up. A lot of us were indirectly slowing down investigations because of various hints, and maybe the wind was changing. Whatever it is, I had a lot of time. The other thing is, I also detested almost going and sitting in some PRO's office, having coffee with my fellow journalists in the afternoon, just shooting the wind. So I would end up in National Archives, and there I began to figure out that the British had, of course, documented all their communications, etc., very properly, and they're all available in very organized way. But starting the summer, even before summer, with the Nehru's interim government, slowly you see the Indians are taking out little functions of governance, and many of those things are lying in files that Indians were maintaining, not the Brits. And the most important of that happens in June 1947, because political department that you're talking about, which is the most important department of the empire, run by Sir Conrad Corfield. He is burning down documents which contains all the secrets and scandals of the princely states and the rulers of the princely states. So Nehru keeps writing. Nehru writes a couple of very angry letters, but Nehru is very angry in that summer. He's actually very on a short fuse. So in the second week of June, there is a meeting which Mountbatten called with the interim government's members, Nehru, Patel, etc., as well as Jinnah and Congress President Kripalani and others. At that meeting, Nehru just gives it to Sir Conrad Corfield. He takes him on in front of everybody, and Mountbatten goes quiet. At the end of the meeting, Mountbatten agrees to set up the States Department. And Mountbatten is smart enough to maneuver it away from Nehru and make Patel the minister, and VP Menon, who is his trusted constitutional advisor, as a secretary of the department. And that is how the department begins.
And this department is entrusted with the task of getting all the princely states together.
Now, once they're given the task, there's a lot of things happening, because when a department happens, as you know, anywhere in the world, the bureaucracy kicks in. So you have these file numbers where you have, like, I was looking for the first file. So I came across the first file, and you have a note from Nehru about what it should be. And then there is a comment from Corfield. Then there is a note saying that, we should have following telephone numbers. Then there is a note saying that, we should write to the yellow books, the Mahanagar Telecom books, to say that please enter our number below the Statesman newspaper and above so-and-so department, So little bureaucratic steps, very bureaucratic steps. And the big things are happening both. But those files have never been organized in a good manner by anybody, nor the government bothered to declassify them in time. So about 10-12 years ago, Manmohan Singh's government began to declassify a lot of files. Among them, some of them were these files.
So you probably were one of the first few people who actually went and checked out these files.
Yeah, in fact, if you look at many of those files, you will find that either me or my researchers or some of the royal family members, because they are now fighting over the assets.
So they want to say, right.
They want to present this evidence in courts. So many of those files have been accessed by them now.
I see, okay.
So there, as you closely read, you realize how a group of 6, 8, 10 men under Patel are taking on the world's largest, carrying out the largest surrender of hereditary power ever in human history. 565 princely rulers plus another maybe 150, 200 principalities, the zamindar, the chieftains. We never in history have we seen so many rulers giving up power in such a short time of span. And I thought, and that is when I began to marvel about the fact that, look, Indian independence was not just the bloodiest partition in human history, not just the formation of the largest republic in human history, not just the first big, state to emerge out of non-violence. Gandhi pulls ahimsa out of our great Indian Hindu tradition and makes it into the most powerful weapon. And it is also the largest surrender of hereditary power. So I said, okay, let me limit here and see if I can tell a story.
A very interesting take to, that part of history. Now, you have credited a team of researchers who you have, said got into these files. It must be really daunting, and you have mentioned that even when you write, to put this together in a cohesive story.
Yeah.
Right? So 2 questions. One, what is the process? We'll get to the content a little later. What is the process when you have all this information? Where do you start? Where do you end?
I think that is a process that a lot of non-fiction long-form writers go through. In our case, what happened was that because it was very haphazard, we didn't know what I'm doing. So initially, I was collecting.
So you didn't actually go there, start reading these files with the idea of a book?
No. I was collecting things like the Treaty of Versailles, First World War. They had taken 32 or 24 photographs. One of them is in National Archives. I would take the photocopy of it. For what, I don't know. So I kept collecting documents here and there. So there were some documents from Nehru's archives, PMO's archives. I would make photocopies. So there was no scheme or a specific strategy. So because of which, then my 2 researchers who worked with me, and later more researchers, we ended up actually collecting a lot of files of 48, 49, 50 period. And then I realized, no, the story should actually begin in the summer of 47, and I need to find a tight timeline so that it looks like a race against time, not creating, but what was it happening. So once you get the documents, I think that is where not just your skill as, not skill, your mediocre skill as non-fiction writer, plus great editors around you like Prem Panikar, Karthika, Ajita, all these friends come in handy. I rewrote the draft 5 times at least.
Wow.
With the help of the editors to get the correct architecture and narrative in place. Because if you don't have the right characters, the horses to draw the cart, no story works. And finding those characters is the actually in the research part. I understand why a lot of people end up being academic researchers, because they don't have that kind of a challenge before them. For us, it is not just research. We also have to find great characters to make it appealing to very busy people, right? So that is how I ended up finding this spy in Nizam's cabinet, this young militant in Trivandrum. You know, there is a British politician who is planning to smuggle gold for his business partner, who is a ruler of India in one of the princely states. So characters had to be located, and then you had to timestamp them over. So then you find out, okay, July 25th is a very important day because that's the last day when the princely rulers were assembling under the Narendra Mandal, the Chamber of Princes. For the first time and last time, Mountbatten is addressing them in the old Parliament building, and he's telling them to sign the instrument of accession. But that meeting is boycotted by some of the most important rulers and their advisors, from Nizam to Nawab Bhopal to Junagadh ruler to Travancore. That evening, there is an attack in Travancore on the Diwan by a young militant. It is treated, even in my younger days or in Trivandrum, it is in Kerala, it is treated as a local historical fact.
And he's a hero.
He's a hero, but a small minor hero, a footnote in the larger history of even Travancore. But as I was reading through documents of Nawab of Bhopal, Mountbatten papers, Indore Holkar's papers, Nizam's papers, etc., I realized that actually his attack had such a ripple effect across, because the Diwan of Travancore was actually one of the key brains of this entire conspiracy. So you fix on a date. Now, we fix on a date, you're actually putting yourself up against a challenge of timestamping each characters across that 21 days, right? You will have to bring them all to... So that's a challenging part, I think, of trying to write a non-fiction.
The second, question that I had is that much of this information is from letters of characters who are very dodgy type, like the gentleman who was the British guy who was in touch with all these states, who destroyed 90% of... I mean, how much would you, and you being a journalist of the kind of caliber you are, where you go where the facts take you. But because usually your book on the interrogation after the Bombay blasts, you have FIRs, you have very specific non-opinion things to go on. On this, the communication that you have to go on is a lot of subjectivity. I mean, I guess that's the challenge of being a historian. Like that gentleman, how you described and the character that is in my head, I would assume a lot of what he would actually write, even as an official record, would be really colored by his biases, his view of the kings and these little princes of India being somehow worthy successors of the British, or he was very impressed with how they behaved and dressed, or whatever else he was impressed with. How do you sift through very subjective takes, which is your primary source, and then put it through a prism of accuracy?
Yeah, I mean, one simple technique that we do as journalists is a triangulation part. You find 2-3 different sources on the same topic and come to a conclusion or an reliable evidence, which may not be 100%, but 20%. The second is files have an immediacy, which provides a lot of credibility to them. So if C.C. Desai, who is V.P. Menon's number 2, is writing on August 8th saying that, hey, by 14th, if anybody who's not joined the Indian Dominion, we are going to take the following actions. That letter should carry, because it's an official file approved by, written by Desai, put up for Patel's approval. It should take precedence over anything else somebody says in the future.
Okay. So,
right?
So that is the gold standard.
Yeah, it's primary source.
That's okay.
Primary, right? The second thing is, for example, in many cases, take for example VP Menon. VP Menon over the years have had 3 distinct periods of recollections or documentation. Number one are the files of 40s, especially 47 when he's heading State's Department in the summer, where you can see his handwritten notes, his approvals, whatever, Now that's gold standard. Then comes in the 50s, he wrote 2 books about his memories when he's robber season, that I'm doing it for Patel and all that. And that gets a silver standard.
Right.
Now in the 60s, he has given some oral historical recollections which actually contradict a lot of the things he wrote in 50s or in the files.
That's interesting.
So I would rather ignore.
So go with that first file.
First file, right? The closest to the reality incident happened.
Right.
Now, for example, Patel, Indian independence, as I think it has become a cliche for me to say that. I think it's the greatest triumph of journalism in human history.
Independence itself.
Yeah, because no independence movement in the world had almost every freedom fighter being a journalist. Gandhi founded 4 newspapers.
That's interesting. I've never thought of it like that.
Yeah, Ambedkar 4, Nehru 1, Kesari. From Gadar movement to, you take any movement across India or the world, they may have been, sailors and migrants and doctors and lawyers, but they were all journalists. Journalists who held their pen against the mightiest of the empire, right? And Gandhi was a leading journalist of the time, the most prolific of the guys. So I think that what is happening in our media today is in many ways is
the opposite of what journalists did for independence. Journalists today are doing the opposite
of it. And the mainstream media, they don't realize that their entire credibility, including their circulations and viewership, is actually on the shoulders of those giants. So when people begin to realize that you are not actually standing on the shoulders of the giants, instead of you're kicking those giants, you will lose. And that is what's happening in the media right now. Because indirectly, we don't realize it. We may be oral traditions, this, that, but we have a great tradition of journalism. So in the independence era, the only exception is Patel. Patel is not a man who wants to write op-eds or doesn't have a newspaper. He's very pragmatic, he's the greatest compliment to, he's such a great compliment to Nehru if you see those papers of that period. They're like this great team, the midfielder and the striker kind of game.
Right.
Now, if I want to talk about Patel and Patel's actions, because he has not left behind diaries or long this thing, I will have to go one by the files. And files of those days are very simple. Okay, the member has approved, meaning the home member has approved, home member has seen, the minister has approved. These are comments that his secretary Shankar would write. Because Patel is so busy, man. I mean, he's bringing down these empires of hundreds of kingdoms, right?
It's not his.
So, and so from there you pick up. Then you go into his collected works, which are edited by Shankar or Durgadas and others, And there you find there are notes by, for example, his daughter Maniben has written a piece about Nehru Patel differences. And very interestingly, she talks about that they were neighbors in York Road before Nehru moved to Tinmurti. She talks about how they were almost every day they would meet after dinner. So they were very close, But then once physically they became separated and moved apart, the difference began to grow. Simple things. But I think what has happened over the last few years that many of us small people have tried to reframe or assess giants, brilliant intellectual giants, using our low capabilities and also to pander to the political narratives that are forming or controlling the route.
Because you want to be rewarded by Gandhi haters, Godse worshippers.
Whatever. Because of which there is a huge contamination of the historical works that have happened in the recent past. I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I'm not saying that I've done the
But at
best
least you
work.
got the primary source.
And I'm also...
most people don't even go to the primary source.
Yeah. I'm saying that I'm willing to be corrected. If I made a mistake, I'll correct it and I'll own it up. Because these books are going to be what is going to feed our children and new generations to understand what a great, glorious human experiment we have, why this experiment should not be held captive or be surrendered to somebody's blind pursuit of power. Because no blinded ruler, no one with the greatest hunger for power should be allowed to trample over the greatest human experience, where the greatest power we had was ahimsa. So let's not be intimidated by
But the
bullies.
birth of a nation is going to have to compete with Bal Narendra. But let's see how that works out. Now, one incident in this, and you just please tell our audience more about the incident in better terms than I did. This gentleman who was in charge of all the princely states, the British, what he destroyed, it got me, there was a contradiction in my head. On the one hand, I was like, damn, we would have known so much about all these, kings and princes who take themselves so seriously and now are sitting in parliament, etc. And through gossip, you hear enough about them. I was like, here was this repository of all their scandals and all the filth that was happening inside their palaces and kingdoms and all the, backstabbing that this gentleman just destroyed before he left. But on the other hand, since you also value privacy, do you think that was good that happened? While, it may have had a lot of gossip value and we would also have seen the true nature of these people who have a cloak of respectability, it would be violation of their privacy, right? Would you rather those documents had not been destroyed?
Of course.
Why?
But
wouldn't that go against your other, privacy bit?
No, but you're ruler, you're the public, you have the control over.
You're a king.
You've got control over hundreds of thousands of people. So your life has to be an open book. But there is a third aspect to what you said, which is what I would draw solace from the fact that, okay, at least the distraction had some good effect, which is to get Nehru riled up to push Mountbatten and everybody to get up the States Department.
Right.
So I think that's a good thing that came out of it. So when you weigh that way, maybe this is better. The distraction was good for us. But I think, I should go back to what Nehru said. In 46 December, when Constituent Assembly is meeting for the first time, is assembled with the representatives, Nehru moves a first resolution about the purpose of the assembly. He doesn't use a word, India will be a democratic country. He uses the word republic. He says India will be nothing but a republic. So we were committed and we are committed to the idea of republic, where all of us are equal. So the ruling princes, the families, they had to be held accountable in the future. And we need to know their history and their gossip and their scandals to have a good understanding of how this great country or this great region lost its financial prowess, capabilities or economy, how the people are killed, murdered, butchered. Like in Travancore in 46, there was a massive military firing on communists. Hundreds were killed. Even today, we don't have the numbers. But probably it's there somewhere in the files that were destroyed. So I'm just saying that I don't think if you want to sit in a palace that is several times Buckingham Palace, and if you want to have the...
And you're the richest man in the world.
And King Koti Palace, and if you want to be having the right to say anything over life and death of people, then I think you should know that your record will be one day scrutinized, and it should have been scrutinized. I think we lost a lot of our history out there, but we gained something else elsewhere.
So out of all the characters who you actually really got into, who carry this narrative forward, do you have a favorite or most interesting, maybe not someone you like, but who as a writer was most interesting in getting you that narrative going?
I think, I'm also very fond of him. His name is Sir Conrad Corfield. He was a minister in Nizam's cabinet in Hyderabad. A lawyer who became a loyal servant of the Nizam official for a few decades. I won't say it is accidental, but as I kept reading the primary papers of Gopalaswamy Iyengar and State Department, and it struck me that, hey, there is something happening here, because Aramudu Iyengar sometime in July sends a letter to Gopalaswamy Iyengar, who is a member of the Constituent Assembly, later becomes Kashmir expert and later becomes State Department minister after Patel. Anyway, he sends a telegram to Gopalaswamy Iyengar saying that I hope you recall me, and situation is getting very bad in Hyderabad, etc., etc. And then a day later there is a second telegram which says, oh, yesterday I think I made a probable mistake, I should not have sent it to you because there is censorship here. But now onwards I will be sending the telegrams to my friend in Ashoka Road, who's a bureaucrat, who or his son will bring them to you. And then you see a third letter, a fourth letter, a fifth letter. This man is giving live commentary about what Nizam and his advisors, including Monckton, the British lawyer, are deciding about what to tell Delhi, how to play Delhi, what to demand on Berar. So by the time the delegation lands,
They
Delhi
know everything.
They know everything, right? Now, how do you ensure that my perception is right? Because I see a note, at least one or two from VP Menon to Gopalaswamy saying that thank you for the telegram from your friend in Hyderabad. It was very useful. And years later, Shankar, Sardar Patel's long time secretary, he writes in one of these Patel collections that Nizam and his team were completely surprised by the fact that Delhi knew everything that they were planning to do. When I was sure, based on documents, that this was probably the most daring spy operation that we saw in the run-up to the creation of India, I commissioned a researcher in Hyderabad. He couldn't even locate the house called Amrita Vilas of Araumudai.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm.
And then I sent a second one, a third one. We had 4 researchers in Hyderabad. Even the best of experts and Nizam couldn't tell me who this guy is. And then we recently, about a year ago, a new researcher joined our team, Ria. She, on a genealogy website in America, she found a family of an Araumudu Iyengar. She reached out to one of his great-grandsons, who is an academic. And he confirmed, yes, Araumudu Iyengar is my great-grandfather. His grandson is alive, my uncle is alive, Jayant. So we got on a call with Jayant after a few weeks of effort. And Jayant was overcome by emotion. He said, look, my tata, he grew up in the lap of Araumudu Iyengar. He said, my tata never told us that he did such a courageous thing.
Wow.
Because Araumudu lived and died in Hyderabad. He couldn't have revealed that secret to even the family because it's such a risk.
Right.
So he went to his grave with his secrets, but I think he was a hero that we should have celebrated. And he kept on sending letters even after 15th August because Nizam is still holding off.
Right.
Until when, I still don't know because I had to go back and look at file before I make any statement. But that's my favorite character because he's not being enticed by anybody. Nobody's giving him money. Occasionally, Gopalaswamy Iyengar will send very terse messages saying that thank you for your letter. It was good, useful, whatever, Nothing more. And for nothing but the idea of India, this man almost was risking his life in the world's richest ruler's palace and being a cabinet minister in a palace which is surrounded by Pathan and Baluch soldiers who were hardened from Second World War. Anything would have happened.
Oh, fascinating.
So
it must be a revelation to you also. There must be a certain curiosity when you were digging into all these. What are the biggest roadblocks that you faced? And were you impressed with, we hear a lot of criticism, justifiably so, like how National Archives maintains some archives because, some of the old footage several years ago, I don't know if you remember, were eaten by termites. But generally, you think we maintain our archives well enough for future researchers to revisit the times we live in, to scrutinize them and dissect them?
There are 2-3 aspects to your question. Number one is, do we preserve them well enough? No, we don't.
Okay.
We are so careless with our past records. Our files are so poorly maintained. They are not even properly. There is not even a sense of hurry to digitize. I should take one step back. Do you know that the National Archives building is not suitable for an archives building? Because one of the cardinal rules of archiving is that sunlight should never fall on paper directly, on old paper. But if you see the National Archives, it has got windows all over the place, right?
Big windows.
So it's not the building meant for archives. But one great thing that I must say is that we have got some great archives. People quietly working in this National Archives or other collections, Jawaharlal Nehru, now whatever it's called, and other places who are preserving this and they're almost eating and digesting and sleeping this stuff. It's like, for example, one of the reasons why I started off, it was an old man who was about to retire from archives. He keeps telling me, these beggars don't care, there's dump yard of this thing, no labor, nothing. So, and then I go to Mrs. J. Ravindran, who was then in charge of the reading room. She's like a walking encyclopedia. You'll find her, people, all kinds of writers will be thanking her because she knows everything where it is. And I'm saying there are great archivists we have. And we have got some great history, but we are so poor. And the problem now is that because we are not organizing them in a very easily accessible way, what is happening is that unlike our generation, the younger lot is now dependent on AI for a lot of their research. The AI is a big threat to the diversity of our history and language. It's because our history is so diverse and it's not digitized. So your OpenAI cloud is only telling you about what is available in limited fashion in English or Hindi.
Yeah, and in the language that it actually is trained in. I mean, it may not even have enough data to train itself in other languages.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think government is thinking through these things because the AI, Western AI, is a threat to our heritage and diversity of our heritage. So yeah, I mean, we are actually it's quite frightening and quite intimidating. Second thing is the process of archives, accessing archive files is itself so bureaucratic. It can frustrate you. And sometimes after you give 10 slips, those days slips, now I'm told digitized, 8 will come back saying they're not available. You're putting in the file number from their own catalog, but they'll come back saying it's not available. You want a photocopy, you'll get after 2 months,
My God, how frustrating would that be?
And National Archives very rarely has permanent DGs. It is usually some joint secretary in the cultural ministry will come and be the DG part-time. That's a level of disrespect we have for our archives. We have rules on archiving, but we don't follow them. So we are a country that is so careless about our past. And that
clearly, considering we're rewriting history books, I think maybe they feel that there is no need for archiving. Now, by the way, side note, Birth of a Nation is also the name of a very unfortunate racist film, as you know, in America, made by that Griffith someone, which is a romanticized version of the Ku Klux Klan. So if you Google Birth of a Nation, that film has nothing to do with Josy's book, just in case anybody...
But I must say that we our editors and me, we had very long debates around it.
On the title?
On the title.
Really?
Because why we insisted on picking this was that there are two kinds of usages that have connotations. Some of the usages by association with things like Holocaust, etc. You tend to keep away. But Birth of a Nation is actually the most suitable terminology that we should be appropriating because there is no bigger nation that has taken birth. And the Hollywood cultural imbibing is limited to a certain sections of us. It's just the English elite who have seen or read about that movie who know about it. And that will be just about 5 or 10% of the world population. So we said no, Birth of a Nation is a phrase that needs to be reclaimed or presented in the right, with the right context, emphasis and the positive context of it. So we deliberately chose it. We ran through many titles. Nothing But a Republic was my favorite. They said no. Then we thought about other titles, but finally we said, no, why not? I mean, this is not, we will not leave this usage and phrase to a racist film made in the black and white era and be forever captured by that. And the second thing is we do not believe, and I do not personally believe that English, especially the culture of English as propagated or shown through Hollywood, is a final say in English because we as India has more English speakers than Americans. So I think English, we have got as much right, if not more, on English than Americans. So those reasons were very clearly there when we decided this title.
How interesting. Now, the entire putting India together, the context setting that this book also does of all the rockets and bombs going off everywhere. Talk a little and, educate our audience or just inform them, I hope youngsters also watching, that there's a lot of criticism of our founding fathers. Some justified, much of it in the current context, unjustified. But even the justified criticism is stripped of context. Decisions are being taken and, especially when you read books like this or even Goha or, you see the primary archives. I mean, you are deciding, it's like deciding how should I set up this room while it's on fire. I mean, that is the way decisions, here, decisions like demonetization, the most daftest of decisions are taken in a non-crisis moment. There was a crisis every hour. And yet, to navigate this country through it and keep it together, what did you appreciate more? What did you learn more of the context that they were operating it, which we tend to forget? Because if, we always want to take a decision based on what we know today.
There are two kinds of leaders that we would know. One are the giants of the freedom movement or people like that around the world. The others are politicians. And politicians, when I say I'm using in a little derogatory way, people who are in pursuit of power, their standard strategy is to create a crisis and pretend to be solving it. They actually create the crisis first. So look at Indian history of last 40, 50 years. The crisis created by them, then they pretend to solve it. And in the last 15, 20 years, we have had some great masters of that trick. I don't want to take names of people because some are dead and gone. Yeah. The second are the legends, the giants of our history, who are dealing with a crisis which they didn't create. They're trying to solve it. Now, for example, about partition. Now, Patel and Nehru and all have resigned to the fact that India will be partitioned. Gandhi is not, because Gandhi is steadfast on the belief that India cannot be divided. So when Mountbatten comes back from UK with the partition plan, and he calls the leaders, political leaders, to brief them about the partition plan and tell them, don't tell this to anybody, keep it a secret, we'll announce it through All India Radio, etc., etc. And at 10 a.m. in that day, Gandhi comes in. Gandhi comes with 6 envelopes, 6 postcards. And he write on one of them saying that today is my day of silence. Unless there is something urgent, I will not be speaking. And then he writes on the remaining 4-5 cards about Frontier Gandhi's complaints about the local governor there. And he quotes. Because Gandhi knew that he has been defeated. But Gandhi also knew that it is time for Patel and Nehru and his followers to deal with the reality of the partition that cannot be avoided. And he writes to Mountbatten on the partition from a train in Bihar a few days later. So that's great leadership, because you don't
know your time is done.
And you're defeated, meaning you won't get your way through. But you also realize that the larger thing about a fifth of the population world being free cannot be stopped. That moment has come. So he leaves it with them. And there are some very interesting moments when Patel will, in passing, tells Mountbatten, don't bother about Gandhi. He's like that. I'll deal with the kind of thing. So that is the greatness of leadership. The second is, you spoke about stripping of context and talking about people in context. It is so, it's quite amusing to see many people today, especially in the last few years, that suddenly finding the tongue and the power and the words to assess Nehru and Patel, and especially them comparing each other, or even assessing Subhash Chandra Bose and others. But what they don't realize that in the summer of 47, not the summer, in the last few months before independence, if not for a Nehru, India would not have emerged as a republic. Because if it was left to a pragmatic leader, whether it is whoever it is, Patel, Azad, now you name anyone else, there are a million moments when the temptation to strike a compromise were there. And now Nawab of Bhopal actually was allowed by Mountbatten, with the approval of Patel, to keep his decision about joining India or not for 10 days in a sealed envelope. Nehru would not have allowed that. He didn't go to cabinet. So Nehru allowed the Nizam's extension, but not for Nawab. I don't think Nehru. So, but one thing that you cannot take away from Nehru is the fact that he is that one man who is, while fighting the British, is also very clear about what the future of this country should be.
He had vision.
Vision, that we should be a republic. And so he is fighting the British, he is fighting the princely states because he's leading the people's movements in the princely. But he's at it saying that India will be nothing but a republic. Nothing but a republic. And when he gets really angry, he will write long letters to Holkar, abusing him, telling him that you are such an idiot. But he never compromised. But when States Department Mountbatten finally agrees to, who actually deserves to be the head of States Department? Nehru, because Nehru has been leading the people's movement in the Praja, or the local people's protest movements in the princely states for years. And he's the one who has this. But in that meeting of Mountbatten, Nehru goes quiet about who should lead the States Department. Patel's dominated. And that's what greatness is about. Like the way Gandhi goes quiet on the partition day or partition declaration, or Nehru goes quiet and lets Patel take over. Because Nehru knows if you are this angry Nehru, this country could be splintered into a million pieces because princely states were not some...
Exactly. In fact, the Nizam's army was...
Yeah.
There was that reference in a book also, right? He wanted to have the discretion of like being a Switzerland in case there's a...
That's it. Nawab Bhopal wrote, saying that I would like to be we should be the Switzerland of Europe.
Yeah, and he was also in touch with Jinnah at the time to figure out how he should play. So a lot of them were playing Jinnah versus Nehru. They were basically seeing what is best for them and play these two against each other.
That is one. The second thing is, as the summer progressed, you see the Muslim League and the Hindu Mahasabha coming together to support the princely states for very different reasons. Jinnah, because Jinnah wanted as many Muslim states to be part of Pakistan or remain independent. For example, he tells Nizam that you should, if you cannot remain independent, you should sacrifice yourself, kind of thing. And in Rampur, for example, it's a very heart-rendering story. Rampur, he unleashes the Muslim League violence on Rampur. Rampur is on flames. But the Rampur's Muslim ruler and his prime minister drive across the burning city of Rampur to Delhi, comes to Mountbatten in the night and says, save us. I'm not going to join Pakistan. I want to be part of India. On the other side, you have the Hindu Mahasabha, which is, Savarkar is a very tragic figure of Indian independence because as a young man, he was such an inspirational figure. And
then he became what he became. And into irrelevance finally.
Yeah, but in that summer, he's so obsessed about opposing a Gandhian movement and its success that he tells the Hindu rulers that you got the right to be free. Because if Nizam can be free, why can't you? So when Travancore announces its independence in June, on the same day, few hours after Independence Act is approved in London, there are two telegrams which are very noticeable, which comes to Sir CP, the Diwan of Travancore. Congratulatory telegrams. One is from Jinnah, other is from Savarkar. And as independence comes closer, the Indore Maharaja Holkar wants to be independent. You see, Nawab of Bhopal, he appoints Muslim League Safarullah Khan, who later becomes a foreign minister, etc., as his advisor. Indore Holkar appoints the Hindu Mahasabha lawyers. Baroda ruler, who had this scandalous marriage with Sita Devi, where Sita Devi converts to Islam, gives talaq to her husband and then marries. So they are all being advised by Hindu Mahasabha lawyers. So it's a very interesting pursuit of power and greed and relevance, and that brings these opposing factors together, all of it. But even in the face of all of it, these people, the Gandhis and Nehrus and Patels and Azads and others of the world, they are so cool. You don't see any... Nehru is the only guy who gets angry very short-tempered, but you don't see anyone else. Even Nehru is very...
flipping out.
Yeah, right. They're there. I mean,
this would make a fantastic series, actually. Are you retaining the rights?
Yeah, the rights are with me.
Because, think about it. There were so many characters, all these little intrigues but amazing. I mean, what a novel way of putting together and putting to task your investigative chops.
Thank you.
But for such stories and many more, you got to pick up Birth of a Nation by Josy Joseph. And if you would like a signed copy of Josy, we will give away 5 signed copies. Mail me at abhinandansekhri@gmail.com. After you have confirmed that you have convinced one more person to support journalism, so journalism doesn't die. Now, Josy is the closest we have to the journalists of that age. So I would advise you to strengthen the hands of people like Josy, and in so doing, we will take some reflected glory and get some subscribers. abhinandansekhri@gmail.com. Tell me who you have convinced to subscribe to independent media and get a signed copy of Birth of a Nation. But Josy, always fascinating listening to you, and I cannot but admire how prolific and organized you are to get so much done in so little time.
Thank you.
How do you do it? Last, for our youngsters, what do they have to do to be able to be so productive with their time?
I think, you're
not on Instagram, clearly.
My PR team does something.
Because otherwise you'd be doom scrolling.
Yeah. No. So, no, I should, on a serious note, say a couple of things. To the younger audience, to the seniors, please pardon me. I hope I'm not sounding condescending. Number one is that, it is not, I've been 30 years a journalist. It's not 30 years of glorious journalism or anything. It's 30 years of a lot of hard work. In between, something good happens and people like you call and appreciate. But the fact is that 99% of the time you're quietly working, reading, making notes. If you see my laptop, I'm sure you'll say that you're mad, because the kind of amount of notes I make and all that. Second is a lot of journalists, public intellectuals, achievers, young achievers, they all forget the fact that the next moment of achievement, the next story is going to be bigger than what you've done. And they get lost in celebrating what their small achievement is. And
it kills ambition.
And that is why I keep saying that in Delhi, you will find a lot of one-story wonders among journalists. They have done some story 20 years ago. They're still beating the drum of that story. So please do not over-celebrate your little achievements. Stay humble.
Otherwise, it will distract from your future achievement.
Next one. And life is ultimately a marathon. And trust me, how much more smart you are in your 30s or 20s, the wisdom that life gives you in your 40s and 50s is something else. And when you combine that wisdom with your brilliance, you produce magic. I mean, I don't have the skill to do that, but that's what.
But if you do, that's the way to do it.
Yeah. So, humility should take you forward.
Thank you, Josy. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.